Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. On a recent afternoon, more than 30 women gathered in a storefront in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn for a writer's workshop. Surrounding them were shelves containing more than 5,000 books by Black women authors, ranging from the famous, such as Toni Morrison, to far lesser-known writers. Since its creation 10 years ago by artist OlaRonke Akinmowo, the Free Black Women's Library has brought readers and writers together to celebrate the brilliance, creativity, and the experiences of Black women writers. The library also serves as a community care center, a book club, a place for workshops and lectures, and a social gathering site. And everything, including the books, are free. Welcome.
Thank you.
It was such a great experience walking into the library and seeing on the shelves books by authors that I read 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, plus a lot of authors that I was not familiar with. So we're going to talk about the library and all that it does, but first I want to know something about you and your background and how you got from there to here.
Well, I'm an artist. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, and one of the things that I love that Toni Morrison said, who you mentioned, is if there's a book that you want to read, then you should write it. And I kind of took her words to heart and said, okay, there's a type of art project that I want that will center Black women as far as our creativity, our brilliance, our diversity. And I want it to be something that the community can engage with in different ways. And I want it to feel fun and affirming and creative, and also really illustrate the vast, expansive influence, cultural influence of Black women. So that's part of how the library came to be, is wanting to do a special type of social art project, wanting to see a special type of social art project and saying, okay, I need to create this because it's been something that's been in my mind. It's not something I'm seeing in the world. Let me see if I can make it happen.
Now, you're originally from Brooklyn, correct?
Yeah, I was born in Brooklyn, born in Bed-Stuy, and I've been living in Bed-Stuy for over 2 decades. And it's become a neighborhood that's really special and really important to me. And so part of the library also exists as a love letter to the neighborhood.
Were you a reader? Are you from a family of readers? Did you read a lot as a little girl?
Yes, I started reading very early. According to my parents, I started reading at 3. I don't know if that's true, because that feels very dramatic.
Parents like to say that, though.
Because that feels very dramatic. But I always loved books, always loved going to the library, and saw books as a form of comfort, right? In the same way that a child might carry around a blanket for comfort, I always had a book with me, and that actually hasn't changed. So books for me became a way to just challenge my own imagination, see the world without leaving New York City, and look at colors, look at shapes, experiment with different ideas. So I've always been a reader, always loved books, always loved the library. And I think that also plays a huge role in the work that I do.
When I was growing up, I remember reading, Mary Poppins and Dr. Dolittle and, those kinds of books. And as I remember as a teenager, reading a lot of teenage romance books. But I don't remember reading books by Black women authors, or even Black authors, period. Maybe there just weren't as many being published at that time. I don't know. Do you think, I don't know, maybe you read a lot of Black authors when you were growing up.
I didn't either. And I actually didn't start really understanding Black women's literature specifically until my college years. So even though I always loved books and always loved reading, I definitely wasn't exposed to, I didn't have access to stories that were written specifically for me, where I was the main character or the people who were writing the stories looked like me. That came much later on. And I'm very grateful for my college classes that introduced me to like Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, because starting with those authors just kind of pushed me to understanding that, oh wow, there's a whole world out here that I need to dive into. So that's, my love of literature has always existed, but the Black women's literature, that came much later.
I had a similar experience. I was introduced to them when I was in college. Of course, the time for me, that was at the sort of the middle of the women's movement. And so women's books and I guess so Black studies as well. So that's when I was first introduced to Black women's writers and Black women feminist writers. Tell me about you describe yourself as an artist. Did you pursue art as a career at any point in time?
Yeah, I work as a collage artist, a printmaker, a paper maker. I also make stop motion animation. And I still make art now, although the library does take up a lot of my time, so my art praxis kind of suffers. But I've always made art, and before the library existed, I hyper-focused on that. And also I worked as a set decorator and a set dresser for film and TV. So I still have access to creative spaces in some ways, but my praxis is mainly focused on the library right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of work were you doing, I mean, for a living when you decided to start the library?
I was working as a set dresser.
Okay. Okay. Now, the legend is that it started on a stoop.
Yes, it did.
So tell me about.
Well, this was back in 2014, late 2014. I had done a couple other art projects, social art projects, one of them being a community garden bike tour that I did every year, leading people around on bikes around Brooklyn. And so I wanted to launch a new art project for Black women. And so I sent an email out to everyone I knew saying, hey, I'm starting this project. It's going to focus on Black women, and it's going to be a mobile library featuring the work of Black women. Please send me books if you have any that you'd like to donate, or please send me titles of books that you think I should have in this collection for this library. And so people started sending me books. And once I made it to 100 books, I was part of a arts festival called Stoops, where I set up the books on the stoop and did a little bit of a performance artist piece.
Okay.
Dancing, playing music, a little storytelling. And that was the first time that the library engaged with the community in terms of the swapping, because the way the library works is for every book you bring, you get to take a book from the collection. So that was when I was able to do the first official swap.
That's such a great idea. Did you come up with that yourself, or?
I did.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Now, I think I remember reading something that you said about at the time that you started the library, that you were experiencing some misogynism. Tell me about that.
Well, I was working on being an activist of some kind. I wanted to be a part of a movement that really prioritized the health and safety of Black women and Black girls. So I was taking part in different types of protests or demonstrations or actions, community actions that focused on Black women. And within those spaces and outside of those spaces, I was witnessing and also experiencing misogynoir. And it was concerning to me because I did not want to stop the work I was doing, but I also didn't want to deal with that antagonism and that sense of dehumanization that can come from doing that type of work. Trying to prove to your community, trying to prove to the people outside of the community that your life matters, that you're important, that you're dealing with different issues, whether it be within the school system, within dealing with situations of reproductive justice, within dealing with violence, state violence from the police, trying to prove that point to folks who aren't taking you seriously or feel like what you're talking about shouldn't really be a priority right now because we should be focusing on this other thing and we'll talk about that later. Like, you know, if
I would think that would get very wearying
exactly
over time.
Exactly. And it didn't feel like I was really making a difference. So not only was it affecting me from like an emotional and mental standpoint, but it also didn't feel like any type of cultural shift was happening. So I kind of decided to pivot and use my art, you know, as a side of Shakur talks about art being a weapon. I decided to use my art as a modality to have discourse around these same issues and these same ideas, but approach it from a place of empowerment and approach it from a place of learning and conversation and community building, as opposed to a place of like, oh my God, Black women are dying giving birth, or this woman just got killed by the police. You know, that sense of like desperation, that frantic. It just wasn't working. It didn't feel sustainable or generative.
So you started carrying these books around.
I did.
How did you, books are heavy.
Books are very heavy. I had 2 huge rolling suitcases. When I first started the library, it was 100 books. And I continued to collect books along the way. Got to 300, got to 500, got to 1,000. So I went from 2 huge rolling suitcases to 3 rolling suitcases to now 3 big suitcases and boxes, like those really awesome bins that you get from Home Depot.
Right.
Stacks of those to 3,000.
What kinds of places did you travel to with the mobile library?
I went everywhere. I went to museums, art galleries, community gardens, public parks, barbershops, local bars, thrift stores, bus stops, other libraries, college campuses, community centers, anywhere where they would have me, block parties, street festivals.
Okay.
Anywhere where people gather is what I would say, and that was free and accessible to all different types of bodies. So yeah.
And it was always the swap method.
Yes.
Yeah.
Each time the library was in a different space, I would activate that space with some type of event. Initially, it was like the performances, but I let that go. Then it just became like a writing workshop like the one you came to, or some type of conversation about a certain author or a certain genre, whether it be Afrofuturism or talking about Alice Walker or whomever.
So.
And then we would do the swap during those as well.
And how would you publicize?
Social media.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and word of mouth.
Okay, but basically, you know, every person, if a person brought you 2 books, they could take 2 books.
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have to bring the books back.
They didn't have to, but
they
oftentimes people do.
Okay.
Yeah, people have been there are people who've been swapping the books for 10 years now. You know.
What impact, okay, so then we have the pandemic. Mm-hmm. How did that affect what you were doing?
Well, the pandemic was kind of interesting because the pandemic is part of what inspired, or I should say motivated me to get the storefront space. Because having a project that's built around community and gathering, and then the pandemic happens and gathering becomes this thing that's a threat to your life, right? So initially, I tried to do the whole like Zoom thing and have us meet virtually, but it wasn't the same. So I thought to myself, maybe there's a way that we can still gather together and be safe at the same time and still be together. And it would just have to require a little bit more intention, a little bit more thought. So that's kind of how, I searched around Bed-Stuy for months trying to find a storefront space that I could afford. I launched a crowdfunding campaign and said if I could raise $100,000, that means that it's meant to be for us to have our own space, our own brick and mortar. And so the GoFundMe launched, and I just pushed and pushed, and we made it to 100K, so we were able to raise that money. And I found a storefront that we could afford and renovated it, put the books in there. And so now, instead of the library being kind of hopping all over Brooklyn, we stay in Bed-Stuy in the storefront, and all the action happens there.
It's more than just a library, though. I mean, obviously, you were talking about all the things you do there, and I was just sort of amazed. You've described it as a place for support, empowerment, and I guess really a pushback at the kind of misogyny that Black women experience. Let's talk about some of the activities that you have there. Now, is there a virtual reading club, or was that something from the pandemic time?
Yes, the virtual reading club still happens, and that we meet once a month, and each month we discuss a different book with the author who wrote it. So we recently talked to Susanna Morris, who wrote a book called Positive Obsession: The Life and Times of Octavia Butler. We've also hosted Imani Perry. We've had some really awesome, beautiful discussions. And the thing that makes the virtual club special is that people from all over the world can tap in and be a part of the library community.
Right. And obviously you have the writers' workshops, like
Yes.
the one you were having on Saturday about a very interesting subject.
Yes, yes. Yes, that was a good one. That was a good one. That workshop was led by Deisha Philyaw, who wrote an amazing short story collection called The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. She's an awesome workshop facilitator, literary advocate, and just all-around person. Every month we have some type of writing workshop that focuses on a different idea, theme, prompt, or book, or style of writing. So we might have something about personal essays, or we might have something about poetry, or how to turn a memory into a short story. So that one was about how to incorporate sex into your writing, which Deisha is really good at. Mm-hmm. And it was packed, of course.
It was packed.
Because we have a lot of writers in our community, and I think that there's an appreciation for being able to talk to someone who is published and who is willing to share very specific methods and processes around writing. Very, very willing to share the ins and outs of what it means to be published, finding a book agent, finding an editor, how to find your voice, what is your voice, how to create characters, all those different things that oftentimes some folks in our community may not have access to, whether it's because they're too busy, because they're working multiple jobs and raising children, or they just can't afford to take a fancy writing class and somewhere upstate, or they just aren't sure if they even want to call themselves writers yet. So here's a chance to experiment in a low risk, no risk environment.
How important is it that Black women tell their stories?
Yeah, I think it's very important Black women tell our stories. I think it is a way to affirm our existence in the world. I think that when a Black woman tells her story and puts it out into the world, it empowers other Black women to continue living and thriving. I think it's awesome to read the story of somebody who you might relate to what they're going through and gain some insight on how they got through, and maybe get a clue from their existence.
I read an interview with you in which you described, you were asked, what story would you tell if you were to write a memoir?
Oh my goodness, what did I say?
Well, what story would you tell if you were to write a memoir? What would be the elements of that story?
Wow. I would probably write a lot about how being a mom changed me. I would write a lot about how my stubbornness is part of the reason why I was able to get as far as I did doing this work. I would probably write about my neurodivergence, my mental health struggles, loneliness. It sounds like it would be depressing, but there'd be some joy and happiness in there, some creativity. I've been what they call cash poor for most of my life, so I think I would want to write about how even though I never really had access to wealth or funds, I still managed to find access to the things I needed for myself and my child.
You've been able to do a lot, even beyond that.
Yeah. We, her and I, we've gone on several trips, and she's 24 now. She's like an amazing person, so I'm very proud of her. I would write about art. I love art. I love Black women artists like Elizabeth Catlett, Fate Ringgold, Betty Saar. So I would write a lot about art and about color and texture.
Sounds like an interesting book.
Process. I came out with a book last year through my artist residency at the Metropolitan Museum, and that book focuses on rituals of rage, safety, and pleasure, and it's all about the survival strategies that Black women employ to access these different feelings.
And what's the title?
It's called Pretty Little Brick.
Okay. Pretty Little Brick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the library, I mean, you do a lot of other things. There are like you screen films, game nights, there's a free store. People can just come in and sit and read. There's a backyard where you can just come and sit.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Is that your primary focus now? Are you also working doing other work as well? Or is this your primary thing?
Well, the library doesn't pay me any money, so I have to work in other ways. My main source of income up until recently was working as a set dresser, but that business has kind of gone a little dry at the moment. So right now I'm thinking about going back to school, actually, and coming here, which is so ironic. But yeah, right now the library pretty much takes up all of my time. The programming, the fundraising, the organizing of the space, the curating of the collection, the making social media posts, meetings, press, and things like that. So it does feel like a full-time job, even though there's no salary. But in addition to that, I also work on art projects. I'm working on a film right now, stop motion, about a librarian, Dorothy Porter, who started the library that's on Howard University campus. So
You're a busy lady.
Yes, very busy, busy body.
Looked like you had a bunch of volunteers who help out.
I have a small team of volunteers who are so wonderful, and I'm so grateful for them. They come into the library during different times just to kind of help me to set up, break down, make sure I have certain things in place. They just pitch in such a beautiful way, and I'm so grateful for the volunteers.
What kinds of books do you especially like to read?
I like to read a lot of political theory. I like to read history books, and I like to read speculative fiction and personal essay collections.
Okay. What would you say has been the most rewarding part? Well, the library has been in existence for 10, 11 years, 10 years now. What's been the most rewarding part of what you've done there, what you do there?
The most rewarding part of this project is the reception. I don't know if that makes me sound egotistical, but the appreciation that people have for this space is so beautiful to witness. When people come into the library and they see all of the books that are in there and they get so excited and they just look so happy, and it's like stars in their eyes. I love that energy. I love that vibe. I love when people find a book and they read it and they come back and tell me how good it was and how much it just like changed them and inspired them and made them want to try something new or think differently. I love when people come in and see the poster of Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer, and they say, "Oh, those women look familiar. Who are they?" And then we can have a conversation about these amazing women in history. When folks come in and they say, "I didn't know that Black people wrote science fiction or wrote romance novels or poetry," it's just really fun to talk to people about books, engage with people about books. It's very nerdy to nerd out with people about different writers and different ideas. We have a period pantry as well, and I appreciate the way people use the pantry. I know that sometimes it's a struggle to have access to those products. People use the free store. When people come in and take an art class and they say, "I've never taken an art class before," and they get excited about something they made.
Well, we're running out of time, but I want to tell you that I certainly got excited when I came in, and I certainly felt that energy, and I certainly noticed that photograph of Fannie Lou Hamer.
Thank you.
And it's great work that you're doing. Tell me quickly, how can people support the library?
People can support the library by donating to the Give Butter campaign, givebutter.com/TFBWL. They can also just come through to check out the space and trade books with us, come read with us, and follow us on social media.
Okay.
Send us positive vibes.
Okay. I'd like to thank OlaRonke Akinmowo, founder of the Free Black Women's Library, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on Instagram at 1-to-1 CUNY TV, and you can watch us on the go by downloading the CUNY TV app. For 1-to-1 and CUNY TV, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.